Hello and welcome to this knitting podcast. Yes, it is a new one. I'm Claudia and you might know me from my Booktube channel, Spinster's Library. You might know my cat Minerva if you know Spinster's Library. On Spinster's Library I have been talking about books for a good 4 years now, I want to say. And every now and again I mention that I also knit, and every now and again when I do that I get comments asking me to make videos about knitting as well. I love watching knitting videos and in particular knitting podcasts because they are just a great casual way of not interacting with other knitters, because obviously I'm still just me at home watching these videos, but feeling like I'm part of a community. And so I thought I might give this whole thing a go myself. The channel you're watching this on is actually my second channel, on which a few years ago I uploaded a few videos I made about culture and politics, in particular UK, European, Germany related politics. However, while I enjoyed making those videos, I did not enjoy the interaction I got on those videos from xenophobes and Brexiters and those types of, to be honest, mostly men. I just did not enjoy the argument. And so I stopped making videos on those topics, even though they are topics that I'm passionate about and that I talk about in my everyday life. I decided that I don't need to unnecessarily stress myself on the internet by drawing the attentions of people whose opinions I frankly don't care about. So instead, I am revamping this channel as a channel on which to share more pleasant things, such as knitting. But as I mentioned, my first passion is reading, and if you're interested in my bookish videos, you will find a link to my Spinster's Library channel in the description box. As this format of video is completely new to me, I can't promise anything. I can't tell you if it's going to be casual or planned through, or if it's going to be long or short videos. I mean, by the time you've clicked on this video, I'm sure you'll know whether it's going to be long or short at least. Be prepared for anything. Be prepared for foul language, so maybe don't watch this with children present. Be prepared for asides and rants. Definitely be prepared for cats. If there's one thing I can promise you about this channel, is there will be cats. Minerva, say hi. It's a funny thing about knitters and cats. I feel like a lot of knitters have cats, but when I wear hand-knitted items, I'm so careful with picking them up because while Minerva has never scratched any human in her life, those claws, when she like needs you or just sort of holds on, they can rip yarn, they can shred yarn. And as much as I love her, I am not willing to shred my jumpers. In this very first episode, I'm basically just going to talk about some very recent knits of mine and about some works in progress and about what I'm expecting for the future, what I want to do in the future. However, I'm also hoping to do some more roundup style episodes. I want to do one about the jumpers I've knit. I want to do one about the socks I've knit. A brief history of my knitting, just so you know what kind of level of expertise you can expect. If your expectations are here, you might want to drop them right down to at least ground level, maybe down to the third or fourth circle of hell, because I am not an accomplished knitter. I'm not terrible. I mean, I made this and I'm wearing it and it's not fallen apart and it doesn't have any holes in it. So there's a start. But I'm certainly no expert, and this isn't really a platform on which to share any kind of advice or expertise. This is very much just an exchange of knitting related nerdery. So a little bit about my knitting. I am fairly certain I was taught to knit by my grandmother when I was a child. I was definitely taught to crochet by her, and I have a feeling that she also taught me to knit. But that's a long time ago. I crocheted throughout my childhood and teenage years, sort of on and off. I basically knew how to make squares and circles, and sometimes the circles came out a little wonky, and in that case I called them hats, but I never really went at it methodically. And then a few years ago, and this was pre-pandemic, I know a lot of people got into knitting or back into knitting during the pandemic, but I started knitting again in 2018 or 2019. That's when I found knitting tutorials on YouTube. That's when I found knitting patterns on Ravelry, and a new hobby was born. I remembered the technique from my childhood, so I am a continental knitter. My grandmother was Italian and I am German, so we span the continent. But everything else, the terminology, how to use reading pattern, how to read knitting patterns, I learned online. Bit by bit, I started to become comfortable with that sort of terminology and that world of online knitting. The very first jumpers from that time no longer exist. Like everyone, what I did first was buy some chunky or Aran weight acrylic yarn and make myself a jumper. I wore the jumper for a bit and then I unraveled it all and I made a cat bed from it, and it served me really well as a cat bed until I moved countries, in which case it ended up in the bin. But let me tell you, my cats got plenty of enjoyment out of that. I'm not going to rehash all of my early knitting projects because, as I said, I'll make a separate video of a roundup of my previous knitting in which you'll see all of the jumpers in all of their faulty glory. But let's just fast forward to 2021. So I just moved back to Germany from the UK, where I lived for 7 years, and I started a new jumper. Incidentally, I'm going to be using the words jumper when I talk about sweaters, but I'll probably write sweaters in all of the written bits, the description box and the title, just because that seems to be the more common American term. However, when I say jumper, I mean sweater. You get it. Anyway, so I downloaded a knitting pattern for what looked like a fairly simple and plain jumper, and that is the Oslo sweater by Petite Knit, which is what I'm wearing right now. So I started this jumper in 2021, knitted the top bit. I think you start with the shoulders and then you knit the front, and then I put it aside and I didn't touch it for nearly 2 years. A lot happened in those 2 years. I moved house several times. I was trying to settle into my life here, and it was a very stressful time. I'm still sort of reeling from that. I'm still coming down from that stress. And during that time, I just didn't knit at all. Until a few weeks ago, just before Christmas, I think, where I said, you know what, I'm going to get back into it. I'm going to pick this Oslo sweater up again and try and continue. And weirdly, it kind of worked. I finished it. God, I forgot that for these things you kind of have to show the knitwear. I'm not sure how much you can... So I finished this in January, I think. There's going to be a lot of I thinks in this video because I've not kept track of my knitting. That's another thing that I'm trying to do, actually keep track of when I start and finish projects, what yarns I use, etc, etc. So this jumper was knit over a period of nearly 2 years, and you can tell there are tension differences between here, the bits that I did early on, and then the bits that I did later on. But most importantly is it doesn't fit right, because when I started this jumper 2 years ago, I was at least one size smaller. So this is supposed to be an oversized, relaxed jumper, and it fits not tightly, but snugly. It has maybe a few centimeters of positive ease, maybe 2 or 3 centimeters, if that. It's really not fitting how it's supposed to. However, I still quite like it. I like the colours that I used. I don't know if you can tell from the general vibe, but I tend to gravitate towards black and darker colours. I am not often one for a lot of bright colours. However, the way that this turned out hits just the sweet spot for me of being still somewhat gothy, but also actually quite colourful. And what I combined to get this look was this very dark green lace weight yarn by Malabrigo. I'm going to find the precise name and put it in the description box. I'll list all of the names and links to all of the patterns in the description box. So I want to say it's just called Malabrigo Lace, but I'm not entirely sure. It is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful, very dark forest green. It is buttery soft. I mean, genuinely just so gorgeous on the skin. However, it was an absolute bitch to work with. It peeled while working with it, or winding it, do you call that when you roll it into a ball? I don't have any fancy machinery like those twirly things. I just wound it from a... Now, I don't know if that's a hank or a skein. God, I'm such a beginner. This is outrageous. I don't even know why you're watching this. I wound it up by hand, you know, did the thing where you sort of drape it around your knees, and it was a nightmare. And I wasted so much yarn that just ended up in knots. So it's not easy to handle this yarn, and I'm curious to see how it wears over time because, as I said, I've only just finished this. I've only worn this jumper a couple of times. It hasn't gone through a proper wash yet. I mean, obviously I blocked it, but it hasn't been washed since. So we'll see how this yarn holds up over time, but it is undoubtedly very pretty. And I combined this very dark green, nearly black laceweight yarn with an absolutely outrageous mohair. Now this is one of those fake mohairs. I think this is from Hobbii. I want to say it has some amount of mohair in it. It has some amount of natural fibre, but it's not 100% natural fibre. I think most of it, 60 or 70% of it, is synthetic fibres. I probably won't buy this yarn again, but I absolutely loved the brightness of it. That's what drew me to it. This ridiculous print. Shades of yellow, green, blue, orange, and most prominently pink. And in fact, that's the colour that comes through the most in the jumper, in the actual fabric. So these two together made this kind of muted rainbow. In fact, I call this jumper, and I call it the Oslo sweater in my head, I call it my dark rainbow jumper, because that's how it reads to me. It is a rainbow of colours, but a gothy rainbow of colours, and I quite like that. This was my very first drop shoulder jumper that I made, and it might well be the last, because to be honest, I don't enjoy the way this sits. I don't like this line here, and I know that's why people make drop shoulder jumpers. Like, I fully understand that this is the design of it, this is how it's supposed to look like. I don't like the change in knitting direction from this way to that way. It's a weird complaint to have, but I'm not that into it. It's kind of subtle here because of the outrageous colour combination, but I don't think that drop shoulder construction is for me. However, I really like the close-fitted collar, and this is one where the instructions tell you to sew an elastic thread into the collar, and it's folded over and sewed down. I actually used an elastic band, like what you use for waistbands for trousers and so on, and I basically sandwiched that between the two layers, and it's a beautiful close fit. Even when I'm not wearing anything underneath, it fits really nicely. It's nice and snug and round. I like that a lot, and I can imagine doing that sort of a collar even for jumpers that say differently in the pattern. So overall, it's a bit of a mishmash. I like the colours, I like how they look. However, the mohair is not the softest, and it kind of feels like a bit of a shame to combine this with such a gorgeously soft yarn as that. But the overall effect is nice. It's wonderful and warm, which is really quite important at the moment because it's freezing here. I live in an old house. I don't know if you can tell, but this is a very ancient old house, and it is drafty and it is cold. And so I wear this when I really want to be warm. So in summary, I probably won't make this jumper again, and I'll probably enjoy this a lot more if it fitted the way it's supposed to. Now, I can't predict the future. Maybe in a year's time, I will be the size that I was when I started making this. Maybe not. I'll wear it, it fits, but it's not the oversized, snuggly, cozy woolen hug that I was hoping for when I started making this, which is entirely my own fault, because it took me 2 bloody years to actually get to finish this. Got no one but myself to blame. Anyway, this was my first finished object I wanted to show you. This is going to get a lot more regular, I suppose, as episodes progress, but for now I'll just show you basically things that I made recently, since this is the very first episode. The other 2 things I want to show you are both accessories. These fingerless gloves are called Leaves, and the pattern is by Valentina Fezova Georgieva, which I'm sure is mispronounced. It's a free pattern on Ravelry, and it was published 11 years ago in 2012. The pattern's written for Aran weight yarn, and it includes a really very simple lace motif on the front. I chose these because I wanted to try my hand at knitting some lace, but I wanted something simple, and this was just perfect for it. The chart is easy to understand. The pattern, if I remember correctly, is written out in words and as a chart, so whichever way you prefer to read it, and I haven't really figured out which way I prefer, but either way, both are included in the pattern. I combined 2 yarns for these. One of them was the Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk in the colour that I'll put in the description box because I can't remember. And I held that double with some Drops Nord sock yarn, which is also alpaca based yarn, in a colour that I probably don't even remember, but if I do, it's also going to be in the description box. Both colours are quite similar. The sock yarn is a slightly darker rusty shade, and the brushed alpaca silk is a slightly lighter burnt orange shade. Together they make a really pretty browny, reddy, orangey colour that I liked. And because both yarns are alpaca based, they are entirely floppy, very soft, and feel really warming, which again, in these temperatures, in this building, just right. I actually didn't have any heating in this house until very recently, and I wore these to work from home at my computer. Yes. I don't have anything else to add about these. They are the perfect project to use up some scrap yarn. In my case, the sock yarn that was left over after making a pair of socks for myself. So I had probably about 40 grams of this yarn left, and I held that double with the fuzzy alpaca silk yarn to make these. I can really recommend this pattern, and I can totally see myself making another pair of these. The second accessory that I made recently was this cabled hat, and this I made without a pattern. I simply wanted to try my hand at cabling, and I'd never done that before, so I watched a few videos on the technique and then came up with this cable. It's a very basic hat. It's a 2x2 rib that goes into a cable, and then the cable itself has the decreases worked into it. And then I also made a pom-pom. This is a Alafosslopi, which I bought at a Christmas market, and that's about the time when I made this hat, just before Christmas. I can't really put this on over my bun. Yeah, it looks ridiculous like that. Okay, one moment. Never mind that now. This is what the hat looks like. The fit is okay. It's a little pointy here, which, it's a self-drafted hat, and I'm not a designer, so what can you say? As expected, it is very warm and quite scratchy, which doesn't bother me because it's over my hair, so it doesn't really feel too scratchy when you're wearing it. But this is certainly not a yarn that I would ever make into a jumper. But it is so, so warm. I wear this when it really is absolutely freezing outside, and I like it. And this is a little bit outside of my usual color scheme. I'm not much of a person for beige neutrals, but I quite like this. It has a lot of depth to the color. You can see the different fibers there. To be honest, I'm not even sure if this is dyed or natural yarn, but either way, it has got different fibers in there, white, black, and various shades of brown, that make this a beautiful melange of color. All right, now we've got control of the hair situation again. Let me show you two works in progress. The first one is a Felix cardigan. This is one of those ubiquitous patterns that if you haven't made one, you have at least heard of it. Felix cardigan, which was written by Amy Christophers. The Felix jumper, I believe, came first, and I made one of those quite a few years ago. I say quite a few years ago, like I'm talking about the 70s. I think I made one of them in 2019 or 2020, and it is the earliest jumper that I still wear. However, I wear it around the house. It's not great, not because of the pattern, but simply because I, made some beginner mistakes, and because the yarn I used is a bit crap. But the Felix cardigan I chose because I wanted a cardigan that I could throw over everything. I wanted a cardigan that's warm and thick and black. As you can see, this isn't actually black. This is a dark charcoal grey, but it's close enough. I also wanted a cardigan with buttons because I don't see the point in unbuttoned cardigans. Hashtag unpopular opinion? Probably not. I doubt anyone cares at all what my opinion on buttons is. But I like a cardigan with buttons. So I picked that one. It looked simple. It has short row shaping at the back, which I think the Felix jumper doesn't have. And it was important to me that the cardigan would sit nicely at the neckline. So that informed my choice of this. It also has this very, very easy eyelet increase, raglan increase. And as you can see, it's very nearly done. At the moment, what you hear clacking about are my knitting needles as I'm knitting the button band. So after that, I just need to do the buttonhole band and the neckline. And then I am done with this. The yarn I'm using for this is Drops Air. By the way, if you're noticing a theme with my yarn choice, it is predominantly budget yarns that I use. I have a limited budget to spend on hobbies, and therefore I'm trying to sort of navigate the yarn world in a way that works with my personal budget. And later on you'll see a really extreme case of budget yarn, which is one that I got for free, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So this is Drops Air. I'd heard so much about this yarn. It is this, it's called a blown yarn, right? Where you have I think nylon tube that is stuffed with fibers. So it's not wound like normal yarns are, but it has a very light and airy feel to it. I was expecting this to be at least somewhat scratchy, but it really isn't. It is incredibly soft and I love it. Originally I intended to hold this double with a mohair, a Drops mohair in plain black, which would have definitely pushed this from the grey towards the black side of the colour spectrum. I knitted up a swatch with just this and I liked it so much that I ended up making the whole cardigan just in Drops Air. The Felix cardigan is very airy in construction. It's quite a loose gauge. You knit most of it with 6mm needles, and so it ends up being quite soft, loose and drapey. But because of the way the yarn works, it isn't see-through. It still looks solid, even though it feels super airy, and I really like that about it. I don't really have a lot of things to say about this so far. I might even do a sort of separate pattern review video. Is that something people do? Again, I come from the Booktube side of things, but we review everything. Do let me know if that's a thing. If you can do videos about specific patterns in which you can talk about the positives and in fact the negatives of patterns. Because while I found this a fun and easy pattern to make, I had a few issues with some of the parts as they were written. Anyway, let me know. I don't want to step on any toes. If that's just not a thing in the yarn community, then I'm not going to be the one starting it. As I've already mentioned, I had enough backlash and enough arguments and enough horrible people commenting on previous videos on this channel. I'm not about to repeat that with the knitting stuff. So let me swiftly move on to the next work in progress. And that is one that I was hoping to be done by now, but I'm not quite done with it. And this is actually a gift knit. This is a vest. Do you call it a vest or a sleeveless cardigan? I think it's a vest. The pattern calls it a vest. In fact, this is vest number 7 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And this is a designer that, oh god, I said earlier I wasn't going to be argumentative and controversial, but this is a designer that I'm not particularly drawn to myself. However, I wanted to make something for my mum. There is a whole discussion going on, isn't there, about the knitworthiness of certain people. And I mostly subscribe to the idea. I think there are some people that I wouldn't necessarily knit for, amongst whom are my husband, for example, whom I love dearly. But I have seen what he lets our cats do to his clothes. And I think if I made him a jumper and it ends up with holes in it from being scratched up by cats, then we'd have a problem. Anyway, my mother is entirely knitworthy. She is a crocheter herself. She's incredibly good at crochet. She's very fast at it. And she has the most enormous collection of yarn I have ever seen in my life. In fact, more than half of the yarns I own. Yarns? Do you say yarns? More than half of the yarn I own is yarn that she gifted me or yarn that I just nicked and she hasn't even noticed. No, I don't do that. I do ask for permission. But anyway, yarn that she has offloaded onto me in one way or another. So she knows how to appreciate a good handmade item of clothing. And we gift stuff back and forth all the time. I made her some socks. She makes me some bags and scarves and all sorts of things. So I wanted to knit her a vest. And I spoke about this with her because I'm not going to put a lot of money and effort into a project if it doesn't end up being just what the other person wants. She doesn't like close cut necklines on jumpers. In fact, she doesn't really wear jumpers. She likes to wear long sleeve cotton tees and a vest over top. And so I wanted to make a vest that she can wear over a long sleeved tee or even a short sleeved tee in the spring when it gets a little warmer but not too warm. The other thing that she was very, very firm on was that she doesn't want anything she can't chuck in the washing machine, which obviously excludes a lot of really lovely, nice yarns. So that limited my search in terms of yarn and it limited my search in terms of pattern. I was specifically after a vest that was open at the front so that she could button it up or not, and that had a deep neckline rather than a close high neckline. The vest number 7 pattern fit that bill. It is very loose, oversized. It has a very deep V neckline. It has nice open armholes so that you can wear layers underneath and it's not going to get tight. And it has buttons. In terms of the yarn, I ended up with a Lana Grossa Cool Wool Melange in the color 116. This is a yarn brand that I'm not sure if it only exists in Germany or if it's just very popular here. I don't really hear knitting YouTubers talk about it, but it is pretty ubiquitous in Germany. Every yarn shop carries it. In fact, there are some yarn shops that only carry it. Price-wise, it is on the budget side of things. I don't think it's quite as cheap as Drops, but we're talking the same ballpark as Drops. And I found this DK weight yarn in a really gorgeous Bordeaux wine red, but also quite a bit warmer than that. I'm sure there is a word for this. Burgundy. Let's go with that. It is superwash, as it had to be, and it is super soft, as it also had to be, because I know that my mum cannot handle scratchy yarns. So I decided to not do what I think the pattern suggests, which is to take a fingering weight and a mohair, but I just went with a plain superwash merino. It feels like a superwash merino, right? It's quite heavy, it's quite drapey, it's very soft, it almost has a cottony feel that I feel like it's quite standard with those types of yarns, and I think she's really going to like it. I made the whole thing. I mean, I can put it on, but it won't fit me. She's a smaller size than me. yeah, it doesn't quite fit me. So I knit this and followed the pattern, and it's all worked out perfectly fine until the point I decided to deviate from pattern. Have I learned a lesson? Wait and see. The point at which I chose to deviate from the pattern, actually there were 2 points. One of them was I didn't do a split hem, because I don't think my mum's into that. So I just did a very basic ribbed hem that's continuous, no splits here. And the other thing I deviated from was the button band. As you can see, so you might be able to tell, this is in fact crocheted. I thought, my mum likes to crochet, she likes it when I crochet, it's her thing, she enjoys crochet, it'll be a nice little feature. And I have seen pictures of cardigans with a crocheted button bands that look gorgeous. And I thought, you know, crochet is a little firmer than knitting, it's a little less elastic, it would be really quite perfect for a button band. But what happened was that it came out really wavy. So if I just let that hang like that, you can see how wavy, bubbly, and just generally ugly this button band is. So I'm going to undo this. A part of me still thinks I can crochet it, right? A part of me still thinks if I pick up fewer stitches, then it'll be flush rather than wavy. But maybe I should just follow the instructions and knit the button band like it says in the pattern. Let me know, do I just YOLO it or not? My mother's birthday is next week, so I mean, either way, doing the button band doesn't take that long, right? It takes like 1 day, 2 days at most. Maybe, you know what, maybe I'll just knit it. Maybe I'll just follow the instructions and do it properly. Other than that, yeah, I like this. This has already been blocked because I was hoping that a good block would sort out the button band issue. It hasn't. So I'm going to unravel this, do it properly, block it again probably, and then take a few pictures of the finished result before I go and visit my mum for her birthday and see what she makes of this. She knows that I want to make her a vest at some point, but I haven't told her that I'm working on it right now. In fact, I've been sort of deflective. I've been saying, yeah, maybe for the next winter, maybe, you know, if I start in autumn, then I'll get it done for Christmas. So I think it's going to be still a surprise for her, except for if she's watching this video, which she probably isn't since she does not speak English. Those are my 2 works in progress. And for this final bit, I just wanted to talk about what I'm planning to make next, since the cardigan is very nearly finished. So the next big project I want to make, and this is something that I feel like has had a bit of buzz about it, is the Helia jumper sweater by Joanna Ang. Since my experiment with the cabled hat, I've been keen to play a little more with cables, but I didn't want an all-over cabled jumper. So this raglan constructed jumper is just perfect because it has cables, but on the sleeves, whereas the body is knit in stockinette. This might just be one where I make the sleeves first. So, you know, where work the yoke, separate for the sleeves, then knit the sleeves first, and then do the rest of the body. We'll see. The sleeves are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, talk about statement sleeves. They have a very intricate looking cable and rib pattern, and they just look absolutely stunning. When I talk about what drew me to this jumper, it's going to be what drew everyone else to this jumper, and it is those sleeves. As soon as I finish the vest and the cardigan, I'm buying this pattern and I'm going to knit it. As for the yarns, I have obviously been thinking about it, and I have got an indecent quantity of this Drops brushed alpaca silk in this beautiful turquoisey teal colour. The colour is 11. A few months ago there was an alpaca sale on the Drops website, and so everyone and their mother has been knitting with Drops alpaca yarns, including me. I think this might have been reduced down to like €1 something or €2 something. So I have 8 balls of this, and now I've finally got something that I can use this for. But when I talk about budget, let me just tell you what I'm going to hold this double with, and that is this ball of street yarn. And I call it that because I picked it up by the side of the road. If you are familiar with Germany, you know that Germans love to give things away by the side of the road. And every time I say that, lots of people from Britain say, yeah, we do that here as well. No. I've lived in both countries, and I can barely go out for a walk in Germany without picking up something. And not just some crap, but like some really gorgeous furniture or kitchenware or books or anything by the side of the road. It's like a free market. God, no, that already means something else. It's a beautiful buffet of curiosities here in Germany on the streets. And among those, I found this ginormous hank of yarn. It was like all twisted up. I think I may have taken a picture of it, so if I have and I'll find it, then you will be able to hear it here. And just the other day, I wound this into this big ball of yarn and a few smaller bits because it broke. And I don't know what it is in terms of fiber. It is pure black in color. It is a 2-ply, and it is very, very breakable. It just pulls apart like nothing. So I don't know what it is. It doesn't smell of sheep, but it doesn't feel like acrylic, especially since acrylic, I think, traditionally is not as breakable as wool. So I don't know. I might faff about with bleach and set this on fire and all the other tests you can do to find what fiber it is, but I might not bother. So at first I was a bit apprehensive about knitting with this because it's so breakable and I can imagine it being a real pain in the ass to knit with. But I made a swatch of this held double with that for the Helia jumper. The Helia jumper asks for a fingering and a lace weight yarn to get worsted gauge. The first swatch I made was just with the brushed alpaca silk, and I didn't like the fabric that came out. It was much too airy, much too transparent. So holding it double with the black yarn, you get this. And yes, I too was surprised by how this turned out, because you can see, obviously you can see the black color throughout, interspersed here in the teal. But overall, it's a more homogeneous color than I thought I was going to get from two yarns as different as these two. But more importantly, it was super easy to knit with. I didn't have any issues with the fragile yarn. It didn't break at all. And it was just all around quite pleasant to knit with. And I like the thickness of the fabric you get for this. So I am going to make the Helia jumper from these two. It also obviously, using the black yarn, has the effect of toning down the rather bright teal colour, which suits me just well. I think overall, I'm probably spending more money on the literal pattern for this than I did the yarn, just because I got this in the sale and I picked this up by the side of the road, and that's fine by me. The end result is gonna look $1,000,000, I am sure. However, I am not just a cheapskate. I do sometimes actually buy yarn. And one of the yarns I bought recently in an actual physical yarn shop is this. Whoop. This. This is called Luxury Lace, and it is by Rico Design, so German yarn company, I think. It is also quite budget. Again, not as cheap as Drops, but very affordable and very common. However, I have never tried this. It's called Luxury Lace. It's made from 70% wool and 30% silk. And it is very, very soft and has a lovely sheen to it. It came in some really beautiful colors, but I went for the black one. It's very, very soft, and it's a 2-ply yarn. I picked up 4 balls of this. Each ball is 25 grams and 200 meters on these 25 grams. So you get a lot of yardage out of this. And yet, strangely, it doesn't feel that thin for a lace yarn. Let's compare this with the Malabrigo lace. And you can see the black yarn is quite a bit thicker than the green yarn. So even though they are both lace weight, this one feels a lot more plump. It has a lot more body than the Malabrigo yarn. I had this sort of vague notion when I found this in the shop of making myself a summer top with it. And so I bought 4 balls of this, equaling 800 meters. I can do basic multiplication. So 800 meters. However, I didn't really find any nice lace weight patterns for tops. And I don't really want to hold this double with a mohair, because I think that sort of defeats the airiness that I want from a summer top. But I remembered a pattern that I made, I think in 2020 or 2021, and that is the free pattern that is the Summer Secret Crop by Jessie May Designs. This is another one of those really popular patterns because it is excellent. It's so well written, it's free, and you can play with it. It has a lot of room to put your spin on it, and the designer encourages that, and in the instructions there's a lot of detail about how you can customize it. I made this with some sock yarn and never wore it because it was just a bit too scratchy. So somewhere in a box upstairs in my bedroom, I've still got that crop top, which I'll probably unravel and make some socks with. But I thought holding this lace weight yarn double, I might get a good gauge for it. So that's something that I will play with. Maybe once it starts getting a bit warmer, maybe once I have finished the Helia jumper. And obviously I'll have to do a gauge swatch and make sure I actually get gauge from this held double. There's that. I think that was everything I wanted to talk about. The funny thing was, I sat down here thinking, I wonder if I'll even get 20 minutes out of this. And here we are, a literal hour of my life later. Probably a bit less for you because I am intending to edit this video. Hopefully it was an entertaining 40 minutes or however long you've been watching this for. Oh, another thing is, if you are a knitter based in southwest of Germany, I am living in the area around Freiburg, then drop me a line as well, because I'd be curious to see who else is there in this part of the world, because alas, I am the only knitter I know. It is truly sad. Get in touch with me. I am going to link my Ravelry in the description box, but I don't have a knitting specific Instagram or anything, so I'll link my normal Instagram as well. Who knows if these things are going to happen or not. We'll see. This is just for fun. So thank you for watching. Bye.